It was supposed to be just another morning on the quiet farmland nestled at the edge of a forgotten town. The sun had barely crept over the hills when Emma Dawson spotted something strange near the woods: a man, collapsed, bleeding, and unconscious. At first, she thought he might be a hunter, maybe someone who'd had an accident in the forest. But one look at his designer shoes, his expensive wristwatch, and the tattoo peeking out from under his torn shirt told her he didn't belong here. He wasn't from around these parts, and definitely not from her world. Emma lived a simple life. She woke up before sunrise, fed the animals, harvested crops with her father, and spent evenings reading old mystery novels by the fireplace. The nearest town was a half-hour drive down a dirt road, and even the internet out here worked like it was tired. But despite the peace, Emma had always carried a restlessness in her heart, a longing for something more, something wild, something real. The man lying unconscious near her barn didn't speak for hours. When he finally woke up, he barely said a word. His face was bruised, his ribs looked cracked, and his eyes, dark and sharp, scanned everything like he was expecting an ambush at any moment. He said his name was Leo. No last name. No explanation. Emma's father wanted to call the sheriff. "We don't know who he is. We don't know what trouble's following him," he warned. But Emma felt something different. Maybe it was the fear in Leo's eyes, the kind of fear you don't fake. Maybe it was the quiet way he thanked her when she brought him water, or how he flinched every time a car passed by on the highway in the distance. Whatever it was, she told her father to give it 3 days. "If he's dangerous, I'll send him away myself." But Leo wasn't dangerous, not to her, anyway. He kept to himself at first. Spent most of his time in the old hayloft, mending his wounds and avoiding questions. Emma would bring him food and ask little things: where he was from, what had happened to him, why he couldn't go to a hospital. He never answered directly, but pieces slipped out over time. He spoke with an accent, faint but smooth, and when she caught him checking the horizon with a military-like awareness, she knew this man had seen more violence than she could imagine. It wasn't long before Emma noticed the scars, not just the physical ones, but the emotional weight he carried like a shadow. Leo didn't sleep well. He'd wake up in cold sweats, sometimes shouting in a language she didn't recognize. He hated loud noises, refused to eat anything out of a can, and always kept one eye on the door. And yet, despite all that, he was gentle. He helped her fix the broken fence one day without being asked. When her dog got stuck in the drainage pipe after a storm, Leo was the one who crawled in to pull it out, even though his side was still healing. As days turned into weeks, the air around them shifted. Emma stopped asking questions, and Leo started volunteering answers, carefully, slowly. He told her his real name wasn't Leo. That his family was powerful, dangerous. That he grew up in a world where love was a weakness and loyalty was paid for in blood. His father, a Mafia leader with connections across the eastern seaboard, had recently been killed. Leo was next in line to inherit an empire built on fear. But someone wanted him dead, maybe a rival family, maybe someone close. He didn't know who he could trust anymore. Emma was stunned, but not afraid. She saw something in him that others hadn't, something he tried hard to bury beneath the tattoos, the silence, and the rage. A man who wanted to change. A man who'd been born into violence, but didn't want to die in it. She taught him how to plant seeds. How to feed chickens. How to sit still long enough to hear the wind rustling through corn stalks. Leo started to smile again. He even laughed once, really laughed, when her goat chased him across the yard. It was the kind of laugh that made her heart ache, because she knew he hadn't done it in a long time. But peace doesn't last long for people running from war. One morning, Emma woke to find tire tracks near the back of their land. Deep ones, fresh. Leo disappeared for an hour and came back shaken. "They've found me," he whispered. That night, he gave her a burner phone and told her to use it if anything ever happened. He kissed her forehead, told her he was sorry, and vanished into the trees. But Emma wasn't the kind of girl who waited around. She followed him. What she didn't know What Leo had been trying to protect her from was that the people looking for him weren't just enemies. They were family. Twisted, corrupted bloodlines that didn't take kindly to betrayal. They had eyes everywhere. And now, they knew about Emma. The next few days were a blur of fear and fire. The barn was set ablaze. Her father was threatened. The quiet farm turned into a battleground. But Emma didn't back down. With Leo by her side, they fought not just for survival, but for the right to choose a life not written in blood. Leo offered to leave again. "They'll never stop," he said. "They'll come for you because of me." But Emma had made her choice. Then let them come. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about a girl who believed that love could be stronger than fear. About a man learning that peace was something worth fighting for. And about a couple who, against all odds, were ready to stand together, even if it meant burning down an empire. But just when they thought the worst was behind them, a single gunshot rang out in the distance. And everything changed. Emma's heart dropped at the sound of the gunshot. It echoed through the valley, sharp and distant, but close enough to freeze her blood. She spun around, eyes scanning the tree line where Leo had gone just minutes ago. The wind carried silence in the aftermath, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. She clutched the burner phone he had given her. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from knowing that the life she had known, the quiet, the calm, the routine, was officially over. She ran. The forest was thick, the early morning fog still clinging to the low brush. Branches scratched at her arms as she pushed through, calling his name in a whisper. "Leo! Leo, where are you?" Every crack of a twig underfoot made her flinch. Her heartbeat pulsed in her ears, and all she could think was that he'd been right. They had found him. And now, maybe, they had taken him from her. But she found no blood. No body. Just the faint smell of smoke in the air and fresh footprints leading deeper into the woods. She followed them, carefully, quietly. A few minutes later, she spotted movement up ahead. Leo. Alive. Gun drawn, crouched low behind a tree, his body tense like a coiled spring. Emma stayed low and crept up beside him. He didn't flinch when he saw her, just whispered, "Two men, black SUV parked off the trail. They're armed. I think they fired that shot to spook us." Emma's voice shook. "What do they want?" Leo gave her a look that said, "You already know." She didn't ask more questions. They retreated, moving silently through the underbrush until they made it back to the farmhouse. Leo double-checked every window, every door. He blocked the back entrance with a heavy oak cabinet and told Emma to stay in the cellar while he figured out their next move. Down in the dark, Emma's thoughts spun. She remembered the moment she first saw him, broken and bleeding. How he'd barely trusted her with his name, let alone his past. And now, all the missing pieces of his story felt heavier than ever. Who exactly was Leo Moretti? And why did some of the most dangerous men in the country want him dead? When the door creaked open, she jumped. But it was Leo, his face pale and jaw clenched. "I need to tell you everything," he said quietly. "No more half-truths." They sat on the floor of the cellar, candlelight flickering between them. And for the first time, Leo didn't hide. He told her about his childhood in New York, born into a life of luxury and blood. His father, Riccardo Moretti, ran one of the oldest mafia networks on the East Coast, hidden behind a web of legitimate businesses and political connections. Leo had been groomed to take over since he was 13. His world had been filled with private schools, armed escorts, and lessons in everything from etiquette to weapons training. But Leo had always questioned the life. His mother, unlike his father, had a quiet heart. She read poetry to him at night, made him promise he'd never become like them. She died in a car accident when he was 16. At least, that's what they told him. But years later, Leo found out she'd been silenced, because she wanted out. That was when he started keeping secrets. He played the role his father demanded, but behind closed doors, he began building something different, his own network, made up of people who believed in loyalty without bloodshed. He moved money into clean investments, built businesses under fake names, and planned an escape. But someone found out. His father was killed in a private jet explosion 6 months ago. Everyone thought Leo was next. And maybe they were right. Emma listened, barely breathing. I came to the farm because I knew they wouldn't look for me somewhere this far removed. I didn't expect to meet you. I didn't expect to care, he said, his voice softer now. But I do. There was a long silence between them. Then Emma finally spoke. I don't care about your past, Leo. But I need to know, are we safe here? Leo shook his head. Nowhere is safe anymore. But we can still fight back. The next day, Leo's plan began to unfold. He reached out to one of his trusted allies, a man named Elias, who had once served as his father's head of security but left the organization when things got too dark. Elias met them in secret at an abandoned barn 10 miles away. He was tall, with gray at his temples and a military posture that hadn't faded. There's a mole in your inner circle, Elias said, after Leo explained everything. Someone close sold your location. It wasn't random. They knew about the farm. Emma's stomach twisted. Can we find out who? Leo asked. I've already started tracing their movements, Elias replied. But you need to be careful. This isn't just about control anymore. They want you gone permanently. And they won't stop until they think you're either dead or irrelevant. On the way back to the farm, Leo barely spoke. Emma could see the storm brewing inside him, the rage, the betrayal, the fear that no matter how far he ran, he'd never outrun the life he was born into. That night, he stood outside by the fence, staring at the stars like they held answers. Emma joined him, arms wrapped around her to fight the cold. You think leaving everything behind will ever be enough? He asked her quietly. Emma looked at him. I don't think leaving fixes anything. But I think choosing something better, someone better, that's what makes the difference. Leo reached for her hand. His was cold, hers warm. Opposite worlds, drawn together by fate. But just as their fingers touched, headlights appeared in the distance, slow, steady, unannounced. They weren't expecting visitors. Leo grabbed her hand tightly. Get inside. Now. Emma didn't hesitate. She ran. Behind her, she could hear Leo barking orders to her father, telling him to lock the doors and cut the lights. The house turned to darkness. Only the low rumble of engines grew louder. The enemies had arrived. And this time, they weren't coming to talk. The sound of tires crunching over gravel grew louder. Leo stood motionless behind the curtain, watching the headlights cut through the night like blades. 3 black SUVs. No license plates. No hesitation. Whoever was inside wasn't coming to negotiate, they were coming to finish what they started. He could feel it in his bones. Down the hallway, Emma gripped a flashlight in one hand and her dog, Dusty's collar, in the other. The Labrador had sensed the tension before the first car even arrived. He was restless now, pacing near the kitchen door, ears pinned back, growling low. Emma's father stood near the fireplace with an old shotgun, the same one he hadn't touched in years, not since the day robbers tried to break in during a thunderstorm and were scared off by a single warning shot. Leo turned away from the window. We don't have time to run. They boxed us in. But if we stay smart, we can outlast them. His voice was low and sharp, like he was slipping into a version of himself he didn't want to be again, calculated, dangerous, cold. Emma wanted to ask him who exactly they were. She wanted to demand answers about the people hunting them like prey. But the fear in her chest made her throat tight, and all that came out was, what do we do? They won't risk a full assault right away, Leo said. They'll try to flush me out quietly. Pick us off if they can. From the back of the house came a sudden thump, something heavy hitting the barn wall. Then silence. Leo moved fast. They're splitting up. One group's checking the barn. Another will circle the house. We have to separate. Emma, take the basement. Dusty goes with you. Your dad and I will cover the front. No, Emma's voice trembled, but she stepped forward. I'm not leaving you. We do this together. Leo didn't argue. He looked at her for a long second, the kind of look that wasn't loud but said everything. That she was brave. That he wished she didn't have to be. That this wasn't the life he ever wanted for her. Then he nodded once. Okay. Together. Meanwhile, in one of the SUVs outside, a man named Marco lit a cigarette with a hand that didn't shake, not even in the cold. He was one of the last remaining loyalists to Riccardo Moretti, Leo's father. But Marco had never been loyal to Leo. To him, Leo was a traitor. Someone who dared to walk away from power. Someone who needed to be removed to protect the empire. We go in clean, Marco told the men around him. No bodies unless necessary. The message is what matters. Back in the house, Emma's father handed Leo a rusted old key. Storm shelter. Beneath the east shed. They don't know about it. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they're at the door. Leo pocketed the key, but he wasn't thinking about hiding. His mind was racing, trying to piece together who had leaked the location. Only 3 people knew they were at the farm: Elias, Emma, and one man Leo hadn't spoken to in months, Vincent, his cousin. Vincent had always wanted the crown Leo never wanted. And now it made sense. The ambush. The trap. It was all personal. While Leo watched the windows and Emma's father held position at the door, Emma slipped into the hallway and picked up the emergency radio. Static greeted her. Then, a voice crackled through. Elias. Leo, do you read me? They traced the burner phone. Get out. I repeat, get out now. Emma pressed the button. They're already here. Static again. Then silence. Dusty began barking, wild and fierce, running to the kitchen. Emma followed and nearly collided with Leo. He had spotted shadows moving along the back porch. He motioned for silence. One figure stepped into view, tall, hood up, holding something metallic. Emma recognized the stance from the way Leo had described them. Trained. Military. These weren't random thugs. These were professionals. Leo stepped out before the man could knock. Gun drawn. You're on private property. The man didn't flinch. Leo Moretti. You've got 10 seconds to come peacefully. We're not here for the girl. We're here to clean up what your father left behind. Emma appeared behind Leo, flashlight in hand like a weapon. Then you're not welcome here. The man raised his hand slowly. Suit yourself. And then everything exploded into chaos. Flashbangs through the windows. The sound of shattering glass and barking dogs. Emma was yanked back by Leo just in time. He dragged her into the hallway and shoved her toward the basement stairs. I said go. He shouted over the sound of boots hitting the porch. Dusty ran beside her, barking nonstop, refusing to leave Leo's side. But the moment they reached the shelter, Emma saw something that made her freeze. One of the intruders had broken off from the group and was sneaking around the east side, right toward the storm shelter. Toward her. Toward Dusty. Without thinking, Emma grabbed an old garden rake and stood in front of the door, heart pounding, vision blurry from adrenaline. Dusty growled beside her. The intruder was almost on top of them when Leo tackled him from the side. The 2 men went crashing into the mud, fists flying, teeth gritted, years of pain unleashed in every punch. Emma tried to help, but Dusty leapt forward first, biting down on the man's arm and dragging him away from Leo. The man screamed. Dusty didn't let go. Inside the house, Emma's father fired a warning shot through the ceiling, and the sudden boom scattered the remaining attackers into the woods. They weren't prepared for resistance. They expected a quiet job. Instead, they got chaos. And fear. Emma ran to Leo, wiping blood from his temple. He was bruised, gasping, but alive. "We need to go," he rasped. This was just the first wave. "But where?" she asked. Leo looked past her, at the body still groaning in the dirt. "We take him with us. He talks, or he doesn't make it to morning." The rage was back in his voice now. And Emma saw something new, a darker side of him. Not just the broken man she had taken in, but the Mafia prince who'd been raised in shadows. And maybe, someone she didn't fully understand. She took his hand anyway. Because love didn't mean understanding everything. It meant staying when everything else said run. The farm was no longer safe. But the fight was just beginning. Leo had never run from a fight before. But this wasn't about pride. It was about survival. And about Emma. They drove through the night, winding down backroads lit only by moonlight and instinct. The man Dusty had taken down was tied up in the back of the truck, groaning, barely conscious. Every time Leo glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw a reflection of the life he left behind, and the blood that never seemed to wash off. Emma sat beside him, one hand resting on Dusty's back, the other gripping Leo's arm like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She hadn't said much since they escaped the farm. Her father stayed behind to call the sheriff and throw the attackers off their trail. It was a risk, but one they had to take. "You have to tell me everything," Emma finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "No more half-truths. Who are they? And why are they willing to kill for you?" Leo exhaled hard. "My family built an empire on money, fear, and blood. But when I was 17, I watched my father's enemies bomb the car I was supposed to be in. My parents were killed instantly. They thought I was dead too. So I disappeared. Changed my name. Learned to live invisible." Emma looked at him, stunned. "You faked your own death?" "I had to. If they knew I was alive, I'd be a target forever. I've been watching them ever since. I thought if I stayed quiet, kept moving, it would be enough. But now they know. Someone betrayed me." Leo's voice cracked at the end. He wasn't just angry, he was tired. Haunted. Like a man who had carried too much for too long and finally realized the weight was crushing him. They stopped at an abandoned ranger station tucked deep in the woods, a place Leo used years ago when he needed to vanish. It wasn't much, just a rusted cabin, a generator, and silence thick enough to cut, but it would give them time. Inside, Leo secured the captive to a chair with old rope, then crouched in front of him. "Talk. Who sent you?" The man laughed, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. "You think this is over, Leo? Vincent owns the council now. You're nothing but a loose end." Emma froze. "Vincent?" Leo nodded slowly. "My cousin. My father's right hand. He wanted the throne more than anything. And when my parents died, he didn't just inherit the business, he twisted it into something darker. More ruthless." The captive sneered. "And now he's cleaning house." Leo stood and walked to the window. "He wants me dead because I know the truth. I know he arranged the bombing. He's the reason my parents are gone." Emma sat down, trying to process it all. Every word out of Leo's mouth opened a door into a past she didn't recognize. She thought she was falling in love with a man running from his demons. But now she realized, he was walking toward them. Later that night, as Emma stood on the porch with Dusty, she heard something in the trees. A branch snapped. Then silence. She held her breath. Dusty growled low again. "Leo," she whispered. "Someone's out there." Within seconds, Leo had his gun drawn and was beside her. But whoever had been watching was already gone. "They're tracking us," he said, jaw tight. "And they won't stop." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't wait. We take the fight to them." Leo looked at her like she'd just said the one thing he'd been too afraid to admit. "You'd come with me?" "I didn't fall in love with a name. I fell in love with you." And if we don't end this, they'll just keep coming. The plan was reckless, desperate, but it was all they had. Leo called Elias from a burner phone and told him everything. The betrayal, the hit squad, Vincent's growing power. Elias, once Leo's most trusted ally, was hesitant at first. "You sure you're ready for this? It's not just about revenge anymore. It's war." "I'm not asking for help," Leo said. "I'm giving you a choice." By dawn, they had a plan. Vincent was hosting a charity gala in New York that week, a perfect cover for a meeting with key crime figures. Leo would crash the event. Not as a ghost. Not as a threat in the dark. But as himself. Emma wasn't convinced. "He's going to expect something." "He expects fear," Leo replied. "Let's give him surprise instead." They spent the next 2 days preparing, gathering evidence, forging new identities, rehearsing every step. Emma used her tech skills to hack into security feeds, gather intel, and pinpoint Vincent's movement. She was no longer just a farmer's daughter. She had become something else, someone brave, capable, unwilling to let evil win. As the day of the gala arrived, Leo stood in front of a mirror in a suit tailored for a man he never wanted to be again. He barely recognized himself. Not just because of the clothes, but because of the fire in his eyes. Emma walked in, dressed like she belonged on the red carpet, her hair pinned, her eyes fierce. "Ready?" she asked. "No," Leo said honestly. "But that's never stopped me before." Outside, Dusty waited with Elias in a getaway van. Every piece of the plan rested on timing, precision, and the hope that Vincent's arrogance would be his weakness. They entered the building separately. Leo moved through the crowd like a shadow, while Emma slipped into the surveillance room with a flash drive. Her job was to disable the internal comms just long enough for Leo to confront Vincent in front of the entire board, expose him with the evidence they'd collected. But things didn't go as planned. Vincent spotted Leo before the speech began. Their eyes met across the marble ballroom, the music still playing, guests sipping champagne unaware that a war was about to begin. Vincent smiled like a snake and raised his glass. Leo felt the chill run down his spine. Then the lights flickered. Emma's voice buzzed in Leo's earpiece. "Something's wrong. Someone's here. They're jamming the signal. I'm locked out." And before Leo could move, 2 men in tuxedos grabbed his arms from behind. Vincent strolled toward him, calm and slow. "I always knew you'd show up. But I thought you'd be smarter about it." Emma watched on the monitor, helpless, heart racing. Leo looked Vincent in the eyes, unblinking. "I'm not here to negotiate." "Neither am I," Vincent replied. And then he leaned in close and whispered something that made Leo's heart stop. "She was never supposed to be involved. But if you don't cooperate, I'll bury her next to your parents." The blood drained from Leo's face. Emma. She wasn't safe anymore. Not even close. Emma stared at the security monitor, frozen, as she watched Vincent's men drag Leo toward a private elevator at the back of the ballroom. Her mind raced. She couldn't hear their conversation anymore, Vincent had cut the comms. But she saw the threat in his body language and the look on Leo's face. Something had changed. The plan was falling apart. Worse, Vincent now knew about her. She ducked out of the surveillance room just seconds before 2 more guards entered, scanning for intruders. Emma knew she had minutes, maybe less, before they shut down the building or locked her inside. She needed to think fast, and she needed backup. Racing down a back hallway, she whispered into a burner mic they'd hidden in her shoe, hoping Elias was still listening. "Leo's been taken. I'm compromised. Vincent knows everything." There was static, then Elias responded. "I'm on it. We'll extract you in 5. Get to the west fire exit." "No," Emma hissed. "I'm not leaving without Leo." Meanwhile, Leo was dragged into a private penthouse suite above the ballroom, opulent and cold, the kind of place that reeked of inherited power. Vincent's smug grin stretched as he poured 2 glasses of wine and motioned for the guards to step back. "You know, cousin," he said, swirling the drink, "I never envied you. But I hated you. Because even dead, you were more dangerous than I could ever be alive." Leo didn't answer. His eyes scanned the room. No obvious weapons. 1 door. 2 guards. But his mind was still stuck on what Vincent had said downstairs, about Emma. He had to stay calm. Vincent stepped closer. "You shouldn't have come back. You could have stayed in the shadows. Built your little life in silence." "But love," he chuckled. "Love makes men stupid." "What do you want?" Leo asked. Vincent leaned in. "I want you to watch me erase everything you've tried to protect. I want you to suffer before you die." And then, another twist. A second door opened. A woman stepped in. Tall. Dressed in black. Familiar. Leo's blood ran cold. "Aunt Celia," he breathed. Vincent grinned wider. "You didn't think I did all this alone, did you?" Celia Del Marco, Leo's mother's sister, had vanished after the funeral. Rumors swirled she'd retired to Europe. But now Leo saw the truth, she hadn't disappeared. She'd just switched sides. "Why?" he whispered. "They killed your sister." "My mother." "She was soft," Celia said coldly. "Like you. She wanted to dismantle the empire. I wanted to rule it. Vincent gave me that chance." Leo's fists clenched. "You helped kill your own family?" "I helped clean up a mess," she replied. "Now I'm here to make sure it stays clean." Vincent looked at Leo like a man watching his prey tire out. "You're going to sign over every remaining stake in the Del Marco Trust. You'll confirm, on camera, that you faked your death and relinquish your inheritance. Then, and only then, we'll consider letting the girl live." Leo stared at them both. Then laughed. "You think I came here with nothing? You think I'd hand you everything while you sit there drinking my father's wine?" He leaned forward. "I'm not that kid you tried to kill. I'm the storm you didn't see coming." Downstairs, Emma was already proving that. She bypassed security by ducking into the gala kitchen, pulling fire alarms, and using the chaos to her advantage. Smoke filled the halls as guests were evacuated. She slipped into the service elevator just before it locked down, rising to the penthouse like a shadow climbing a wall. In her hand was the flash drive with the files Leo had compiled, detailed records of Vincent's offshore accounts, criminal contracts, even the digital blueprints of the fake will Celia used to take over the estate. All she needed was a secure way to upload it. But she had no idea what she was walking into. As Emma reached the suite, gun drawn, she froze outside the door. Inside, voices argued, Leo's, Vincent's, and a third she didn't recognize. She cracked the door open. Leo was standing now, facing them with a bruised face but defiant eyes. "You want the trust? Then go ahead and kill me. But the second I stop breathing, that flash drive you're so desperate to keep buried will go live. Every asset. Every crime. Every face." Vincent's smirk faltered. "You're bluffing." Leo didn't blink. "Try me." Just then, the window behind him shattered as Elias rappelled in, throwing a flash grenade. The room exploded in chaos, light, sound, confusion. Emma burst in the front door at the same moment, gun raised. "Don't move." But Vincent had already grabbed Celia and was backing toward a secret panel in the wall. "You won't stop this," he hissed. "This empire is too big to fall." Leo stepped between Emma and Vincent. "Then we'll make it fall from the inside." Before they could pursue, the panel slammed shut, and the room fell silent. Coughing from the smoke, Elias moved to secure the guards while Emma rushed to Leo's side. "You okay?" she asked, heart pounding. Leo nodded, staring at the spot where Vincent vanished. "No. But I will be." They had survived the ambush, but the war wasn't over. Vincent had escaped. Aunt Celia was alive, and more dangerous than they realized. The files on the flash drive were their only real weapon now. But uploading them would make them global targets. Emma touched his arm. What do we do now? Leo looked out at the skyline, lights flickering below. We end this. All of it. Not just for us, but for everyone they've hurt. The stakes had never been higher. And the real fight was just beginning. Leo stood in front of the old family estate, its towering gates rusted, the garden wild with years of silence. This was where it began. Where his life was stolen and shaped by betrayal. Emma stood beside him, still wearing the black hoodie from their escape the night before. Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. They had the flash drive. Every detail of the Del Marco empire. Laundered money, arms deals, political bribes, was ready to go live. Elias had already prepared the drop points, including trusted journalists and law enforcement. But none of it would matter unless they took one last risk. Leo wanted Vincent to see it fall. And that meant walking back into the lion's den. Inside the estate, Vincent stood at the fireplace, watching the flames curl around the edges of a faded portrait, Leo's parents. Celia paced behind him, her hands clasped tight. News had already started to leak. Bank accounts were frozen. A senator had been arrested. The empire was cracking, faster than they expected. We need to leave, Celia snapped. Tonight. Before your cousin finishes what he started. Vincent didn't answer. His jaw clenched. Let him come. He thinks exposing our crimes will break us. He doesn't understand, we were born from fire. Just then, the gates groaned open. A single black SUV rolled up the long gravel path. Leo stepped out. Alone. He entered the mansion quietly. No gun. No armor. Just calm. Vincent met him in the main hall, flanked by two remaining loyal guards. You always were dramatic, Vincent muttered. Leo looked around. I figured I'd come say goodbye before the FBI does it for me. Still hiding behind your files and tech friends? Vincent said. It won't matter. The world forgets headlines after a week. Leo stepped closer. But they never forget faces. Or voices. From behind him, Emma emerged, holding a small wireless mic live. She whispered, We've been broadcasting this conversation for 4 minutes. Vincent's eyes widened. Outside, across social media and news stations, people were watching the Del Marco heir threaten violence, admit to years of crimes, and speak of burning everything to stay in power. Vincent lunged for her, rage taking over. But Leo was faster. He tackled his cousin, the two of them crashing into the glass coffee table. The guards moved, but Elias appeared from the shadows, disarming one before backup law enforcement swarmed the estate. In seconds, it was over. Vincent in cuffs, blood trailing from his lip. Celia frozen, whispering to herself as agents surrounded her. Emma held Leo's hand tight. His chest heaved with adrenaline, but his eyes never left Vincent. There was no victory in them. Just closure. Outside, as the estate flooded with flashing lights and echoing voices, Leo turned to Emma. It's over. She shook her head gently. Not yet. Because just as the agents began escorting Celia into a waiting car, she screamed, You think this ends with us? You have no idea what your father built. There's more. You've only seen the edge. Leo froze. Elias looked at him. She's bluffing. But Emma knew better. There was a tremor in Celia's voice. Not fear, warning. Later that night, as they watched the sun rise from the edge of the farm where it all started, Leo held the flash drive in his hand. We stopped them, he said. But something tells me, this story isn't over. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. Then we face it together. And as the sky turned gold, a single black envelope arrived at their doorstep. No name. Just a seal. The same seal that was carved into the ring Vincent always wore. Leo opened it, and inside was a photo. His father. Standing beside men Leo didn't recognize. Men who weren't arrested. Men who were still out there. Leo stared at it, heart pounding again. This is bigger than I thought. Emma looked at him. You ready? He nodded slowly. Now I am. Because the real enemy had just stepped into the light. And the fight for truth and love was far from finished. Leo placed the envelope down gently on the wooden table inside the farmhouse, his fingers still shaking slightly. The picture inside had stirred something deeper than fear. An understanding that the people behind his parents' deaths were still watching, still moving silently through powerful shadows. But for the first time in years, Leo wasn't alone. Emma sat across from him, her eyes steady on his. She had been through enough to know what that look meant. Not paranoia. Purpose. She reached out and took his hand, grounding him again in the moment. The birds outside were waking up, the sky now a soft amber over the distant fields. It was peaceful, but they both knew that peace, like trust, was something that had to be defended. Elias stepped in from the porch, a mug of coffee in hand. He handed it to Leo and nodded toward the envelope. We'll follow it. But not today. You both need to breathe. The war can wait a day. Leo allowed himself a small smile. For once, he agreed. After years of running, hiding, and watching people he loved fall, he had finally pulled back the curtain and seen what was really behind it. And though Celia's words had left him unsettled, they had also given him an edge. He wasn't blind anymore. Later that morning, news outlets across the country exploded with headlines about the Del Marco takedown. It was everywhere, on radios, phones, TV screens. Social media was flooded with clips from the live broadcast Emma had initiated. Vincent's threats. The arrests. Leo's brave confrontation. But what captured people most wasn't just the crime, it was the strange, powerful story of the Mafia prince who walked away from blood to build something better. People were talking about second chances, about redemption. About love that changed a man who was born in violence. At the small local sheriff's office nearby, people gathered to thank Emma and Leo for what they had done. Farmers, truck drivers, mothers with kids. One old woman brought a pie and said, "It's not just the rich who need justice. You gave it to all of us." Emma held back tears, and Leo had to look away. Over the next few weeks, the farm slowly returned to its rhythm. Emma's father, now in full recovery, began walking with Leo every evening. They never spoke much, but their silence was comfortable. Mutual respect had bloomed out of shared struggle. Leo had repaired the broken barn roof himself, climbed up there at sunrise and felt the wind on his face. He had always believed the city was where power lived. But now, he was learning that true strength came from people who worked with the land, who didn't break under pressure, who loved without asking anything back. Emma took time to herself, too. She visited her mother's old garden, pulled weeds, replanted new flowers. It was her way of healing, bringing life back to what had been forgotten. One afternoon, Leo sat with Elias, going over names from the photo. 2 men were confirmed alive, now operating under shell companies in international markets. It would take time, maybe years, to trace their web. But the difference now was, they weren't invisible anymore. Leo had made sure of that. With the flash drive's remaining files handed over to honest agents and journalists, a slow chain reaction had begun. People were looking deeper into the structures behind power. But amid the quiet war still brewing, life on the farm found its rhythm again. Emma and Leo adopted a rescue dog, half-blind, with a limp. He reminded Emma of Leo in a way. Tough past. Gentle soul. They named him Rusty. Every morning, Rusty would chase the chickens in the yard, bark at butterflies, and fall asleep under Leo's chair while he read old case files or wrote letters to the families affected by the Del Marco crimes. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in fire orange, Emma stood beside Leo on the porch, her head resting on his shoulder. He looked at her, This girl who had given him everything, hope, shelter, love. "You changed me," he said softly. Emma smiled. "No. You chose to be better. I just reminded you who you were." He looked down at her. "Then stay. Forever." "I thought you'd never ask," she said. They laughed quietly, and for once, the silence wasn't heavy with fear. It was filled with promise. Back inside, a small journal sat on the shelf near the fireplace. Emma had started writing their story. Not for fame. Not for the news. Just for the truth, to remind them of what they'd survived and what they still hoped for. Leo closed his eyes that night with a full heart. For the first time in his life, he didn't dream of revenge or blood. He dreamt of the wind in the wheat, of Emma's laugh, and of Rusty chasing fireflies under the moonlight. The world hadn't changed overnight. But he had. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin something better. Because in the end, it wasn't violence that shaped his future, it was the farmer's daughter who tamed the Mafia prince, one kind act at a time.